Start with the second chapter of life processes part 2. In life processes part 2, we are going to study the two types of reproduction: asexual reproduction and sexual reproduction. And this completes all our life processes. Last year we did circulation, this year we did respiration, we talked about nutrition. Last year we also did about control and coordination. We studied about the endocrine system. So this is about the last chapter that we do in life processes, that is about reproduction, right? And in this chapter we will study about asexual and sexual reproduction, reproduction and modern technology, reproductive health, and also population explosion. Today we will first start with what is the difference between asexual reproduction and sexual reproduction, right? Basically, to reproduce means to form a new organism, okay? Obviously of the same species. For example, an amoeba will give birth to another amoeba. It is called as Dr. Amoebulae, right? We don't call it sun. I don't know why, right? But they're called as Dr. Amoebulae, right? But an amoeba will not give rise to a hydra. A hydra will not give rise to a planaria. A planaria will not give rise to a flatworm. Okay, the earthworm will not give rise to a cockroach. So it is of the same species. Now, there are two possibilities. Either there are gametes formed. For example, there is a male gamete and a female gamete that is formed, or without the involvement of gametes. If gametes are not involved, okay, that is body cells. Somatic cells means body cells are involved. The word somatic, soma, means body cells are involved. Such a type of reproduction is known as asexual reproduction. So, process of formation of a new organism by an organism of the same of an organism of the same species without the involvement of gametes is called as asexual reproduction. If I want to talk about sexual reproduction, what do I have to say? Process of formation of a new organism by an organism of the same species by the involvement of the male and female gamete is known as sexual reproduction. So, reproduction with the help of male and female gamete is called as sexual reproduction. Is that clear? Now, in the last chapter, we studied about mitosis and meiosis. Mitosis is a cell division in which the cell which is formed is a replica of the parent cell, exact copy, right? So, but when we studied meiosis, I explained to you, this is my chromosome. When chromosomes come together, right? There is one part of this chromosome. I'm going to use another color for the other chromosome, right? This is my red wala chromosome and this is my blue wala chromosome, right? When there is sexual reproduction, a part of this blue and this part of this red, they exchange their place. So now we have blue, okay? We have a dot of red in between. Okay, we have a dot of red in between. Then again we have blue, right? So this is how there's exchange that has taken place. And therefore, we do not get replicas of the parent cell, but with variations. So now in asexual, the new organism has an exact genetic similarity with the reproducing organism, right? Or the other side here, the new organism is genetically different from its parents. It is genetically different from its parents, okay? Now, it consists only of asexual reproduction consists of only one parent. Sexual reproduction will consist of how many parents?
Miss two.
Two, male and female. Okay, it is not male, male, female, female. Male and female can reproduce sexually to produce a new organism of the same species. Now, asexual reproduction takes place by mitotic cell division, whereas sexual reproduction takes place by both meiosis as well as mitosis. When gametes are formed, the cell division is meiosis. When the gametes unite and the zygote is formed, the division, further division takes place with the help of mitosis, right? So this is the fourth point. Gamete formation takes place by meiosis. However, once the zygote is formed, mitotic division takes place. So absence of genetic recombination is a drawback of asexual reproduction, whereas rapid process is an advantage of this type of reproduction. On the other hand, in sexual reproduction, the presence of genetic recombination is an advantage, whereas the slow process is a disadvantage of this type. Genetic recombination is an advantage, whereas slow process of reproduction is a disadvantage of this type of reproduction. Now, I am going to say the point on asexual. One of the boys are going to tell me the corresponding point for sexual reproduction. That's how we will know the difference between asexual and sexual reproduction, right? I want Beckham to give me the first answer. Process of formation of new organism by an organism of the same species without the involvement of gametes, that is with the help of somatic cells, is called as asexual reproduction. Can you tell me the point for sexual reproduction that differentiates this?
Yes, miss.
Yeah, quick. Process of formation of a new organism. I will not say the word without. What will I say?
Miss with.
With the involvement of? With the involvement of?
Two
Miss
parents.
gametes.
No, with the involvement of gametes, right?
Yes, miss
Male and
gametes.
female gamete, okay, is called as sexual reproduction. Is called as sexual reproduction. Second point, the new organism has an exact genetic similarity with the reproducing organism. What is the other point?
Miss, the new organism does not have exact genetic similarity with the reproducing organism.
It shows variation, genetically different. It shows variation from its parent, right? Now, another boy. Come on, see the third point. It consists only of one parent. What will you say for sexual reproduction? Another boy, give me your name and then tell me the point. Asexual reproduction consists of only one parent. What is it for sexual reproduction? Nobody knows?
Consist of two parents.
Miss Vaibhav, it consists of
Yes.
two parents actually.
It consists of two parents, right? Next, another boy answered before Vaibhav. Who was that boy? Give me your name.
Aaron Fernandez.
Aaron Fernandez. And then tell me the next point. It occurs by mitotic cell division. What does sexual reproduction occur by?
Meiosis.
No, the word is that is very important.
It occurs with
Gamete
both.
formation takes place by meiosis. However, later on, mitotic division takes place. So it is not only meiosis, both mitosis and meiosis are there in sexual reproduction. So gamete formation takes place by meiosis. However, once the zygote is formed, the mitotic division takes over. Is this clear? Okay, who will explain the fifth point, the distinguish between absence of genetic recombination is a drawback, whereas rapid process of reproduction is an advantage of this type of reproduction. Can you tell me the corresponding point for sexual reproduction that distinguishes this from asexual? Yes? Come on, boys, somebody should be able to answer.
Miss, presence of genetic recombination.
Presence of genetic recombination and?
Miss, is a disadvantage.
Yeah. Whereas?
Miss, whereas rapid can become slow.
Slow process of reproduction is a disadvantage of
Disadvantage.
this type of reproduction. Okay, so genetic recombination is an advantage, whereas slow process of reproduction is a disadvantage of this type of reproduction. Is this clear? So this is the first this is about the difference between sexual and asexual reproduction. Now we are going to study asexual reproduction in unicellular organisms. Asexual reproduction in unicellular organisms can take place with the help of binary fission, multiple fission, and budding. These are the three processes: binary fission, multiple fission, and budding. I want you to look at this diagram very carefully. Okay, this is my parent cell. This is my amoeba. When I talk about binary, bisect, divide into two parts. Okay, bisect means equal parts, but binary fission means the cell divides into two parts. Now the first thing that divides is the nucleus. So from one nucleus, you will get two nuclei, then your cytoplasm divides and you form two daughter cells. So from one cell, we are forming two daughter cells. This is known as binary fission. Now, sometimes the axis of division, okay, it takes, there are two ways. Sometimes it is at any plane. So in amoeba, it occurs at any plane. So anywhere it divides, because amoeba itself has no proper shape. But in the case of paramecium, it is transverse, and in the case of euglena, it is longitudinal. So longitudinal means from the top to bottom it goes. Transverse is at the side like this way. So first what happens is the nucleus divides, then the cytoplasm divides, and the two daughter cells are formed. The two new daughter paramecium are formed. Here also, when euglena divides also, you get two daughter cells. Right? So what is binary fission? The parent cell divides into two similar daughter cells. This occurs by a process which is known as mitosis, or it also may be known as amitosis. Okay, we have done in detail about mitosis, but we have not studied anything about amitosis. What is the meaning of amitosis? Amitosis is the cell division by a simple cleavage, means simple division of the nucleus and division of the cytoplasm. There are no chromosomes which are involved. There is no spindle formation that takes place. Those threads that I showed you to pull the chromosomes apart, that does not occur. Okay, in binary fission, sometimes it occurs, that is when if it is mitotically dividing, sometimes it is amitosis, means simple division takes place, just the nucleus divides and the cytoplasm divides. Is it clear? It is performed by an organism during favorable conditions, that is when there is abundant food. The axis of division, it may be simple, that is anywhere, it may be transverse, or it may be longitudinal. Example of simple is amoeba. Example of transverse is just now I showed you. What is transverse fission? Example, a slipper shaped organism which is known as paramecium. Okay, the spelling of this can be P-A-R-O-E-C-I-U-M, paramecium. Okay, and longitudinal is euglena. These are various lower organisms. Okay, these are unicellular organisms, right? So longitudinal fission occurs in euglena, transverse fission occurs in paramecium, and simple fission occurs in amoeba. So this is binary fission. Now, what is multiple fission? If binary is dividing into two, what does multiple fission mean? It means the cell dividing into many smaller cells. Okay, so now see, this is my parent amoeba. Okay, now during unfavorable conditions, what happens is this parent amoeba, it secretes. So this is my amoeba. Okay, so what it does is it withdraws its pseudopodia, means it becomes slightly roundish in shape, and it forms a cyst around it. A cyst is a covering, right, to protect the amoeba because the conditions are adverse, right? So it forms a cyst around it, right? And it is dormant. Dormant means it does not move around, right? Now what happens is this big nucleus that is there, it splits to form smaller nuclei, many smaller nuclei. Correct? When it is dormant, it is doing some work, right? It is dividing into many smaller nuclei. And the cytoplasm that is there, one part of the cytoplasm goes around here, another part goes around here, and around here, and around here, and around here. So the cytoplasm also goes and surrounds the nucleus, right? And they remain quiet and they don't do anything till favorable conditions occur, right? When the conditions become favorable, the cyst, it bursts open, okay? And the daughter amoebae or amebulae are released, right? So this is known as my multiple fission, which occurs during unfavorable conditions. So the first thing that happens is the pseudopodia formation stops and the movement stops. So I can say, in other words, it becomes dormant. Okay, it becomes dormant, right? Then it becomes round and it is covered over by a protective cyst. Okay, a covering. In the cyst, repeated nuclear divisions take place, forming many nuclei. So from the parent nucleus, many nuclei are formed. The cytoplasm also divides. It forms many amebulae. It divides and it forms forming many amebulae. The cyst persists in adverse conditions, and when the favorable conditions return, it breaks open and releases many amebulae, right? So my first was my binary fission, now is my multiple fission, and the last one is budding. Budding seen in unicellular organisms. We talk about budding in yeast, right? We have seen yeast multiplying, right? We can see it when we cannot observe, we can observe under the microscope, right? What happens is, first, this is my yeast cell, it forms a small bud. Now, a small part of the nucleus moves into that bud and a part of the cytoplasm follows it. The new bud is formed, chain of buds are formed, and it separates out and it gives you a new organism, that is the yeast, right? So a small bud comes out of the parent cell. The cell produces two daughter nuclei by mitotic division. Yeast cell is known as the parent cell. Bulge appears. One of the two daughter nuclei enters, bud separates from the parent cell and it begins to live independently. So this is my budding. So small bud comes out, nucleus divides, two daughter nuclei are formed, right? Bulge appears, nuclei enters the bulge, or it enters this bud as they call it. The bulge is called as the bud. Okay, a little bit of the cytoplasm also goes and the bud separates from parent and it begins to live independently. So if they ask you for asexual reproduction in binary, in unicellular organisms, we have to talk about binary fission, where the parent cell divides into two identical cells. Binary fission, right? Fission means to
Hello,
split.
miss. It's only yeast buds.
In unicellular, only yeast is given as an example. There are other examples also, right? So the next one is multiple fission, which takes place in unfavorable conditions. And the last, we are talking about unicellular organisms. We are talking about budding, right? Other organisms also bud, right? But they are not unicellular, okay? Unicellular, I don't know whether there are any more examples, okay, of unicellular. It can be seen in some bacterias, okay? Yeast it can be seen in, okay? As far as unicellular organisms are concerned, some bacteria also reproduce by budding, okay? So this is my as far as my asexual reproduction in unicellular organisms is concerned. Now, in multicellular organisms, what are the types of asexual reproduction? The first one we are going to study is fragmentation. Can you tell me the meaning of this term fragmentation? Fragmentation means to break into small parts, right? Fragmentation. If you understand English, you can write all answers, right? Fragmentation. Okay, they break into small fragments or
The
small
breaking of
parts.
small parts.
Yes. The next type of reproduction in multicellular is budding, right? Where a bud is formed. Hydra is an example we are going to study here, right? The next type of reproduction which we have to study is regeneration. Okay, this is very interesting, right? Which we see in the, we cannot call it as reproduction, but if we see, we talk about the lizard's tail. If the tail gets cut, do you know it can regrow its tail? Okay, that is because of regeneration. However, some animals like the planaria, okay, their body is broken down into small parts, and each part regenerates, forming a new organism. So the second, we are going to study regeneration. Third, we are going to study vegetative propagation. Okay, now which are the vegetative parts of the plant? The vegetative parts of the plant are the root, stem, and leaf.
Means
Okay,
roots.
vegetative means asexual, right? The sexual part of a plant is its flower, right? So vegetative propagation takes place with the help of with vegetative parts like the root, stem, and the leaf. This is known as vegetative propagation. And the last which we are going to study is spore formation. Okay, is spore formation. Okay, so these are the 5 types of asexual reproduction that we are going to study. Okay, now the first type let us consider is fragmentation, which is seen in Spirogyra, right? Now, can you see, this is my parent Spirogyra, It breaks into smaller fragments, and each fragment grows and gives rise to a new Spirogyra. So this is known as fragmentation. So the body of the parent organism breaks into smaller fragments. How does it break? Either it strikes against a rock, okay, when it is moving, right? Most of these live in water, right? So they strike against a rock or a stone and they break into fragments. And each fragment now begins to live independently. Spirogyra undergoes fragmentation in favorable conditions. Now, even cycin is a type of sponge. Even if it breaks up accidentally, each fragment develops into a new cycin, right? Now, let's talk about regeneration. This is what I was telling you. This is my planaria, right? A planaria can be cut into 3 parts, okay? And each part, now see, this is my planaria's head. The head has formed a new organism. This is the tail portion of the planaria. It has formed a new portion. And this middle portion also will form a new organism. So the head forms a new organism. The tail portion forms a new organism. The tail portion and the middle portion again forms a new organism. So the body is broken into 2 parts, right? And each part, 2 or more parts, each part regenerates the remaining part of the body, forming 2 new organisms. Okay, forming 2 new organisms. Is this clear? Now, so why they say 2 parts, no boys? See, these 2 parts form 2 new organisms, and this is the original organism, the parent organism, which it goes back to, right? So this is my regeneration in planaria. Now the next one is budding. Now, repeated divisions of regenerative cells form a bud. The bud grows up progressively and finally forms a small hydra. The dermal layers, means the skin layers, and the digestive cavity are in continuity with the parent hydra. Obviously, till the organism is there, the parent hydra supplies nutrition to the budding hydra. The new hydra then separates and leads an independent life after sufficient growth. Right? So here, can you see there's a tiny bump that appears on the parent hydra? Okay, it develops a bud. The bud grows. Okay, the nucleus and the cytoplasm enter into the bud. The bud breaks off and it lives as an independent hydra. This is my hydra, budding in hydra, which is seen, okay, with the in which you can see budding in hydra, okay, in this slide. Now, the
Miss, yes, miss, it's loading.
Yes.
Miss, yes,
Okay.
it's recording.
Plant. The flower is the reproductive whirl of the plant. Okay, so if we leave the flower out, if we have either the root or the stem or the leaf or the bud, okay, and the new plant grows, it is known as vegetative reproduction or vegetative propagation. Boys, tell me, seed is
Page number.
vegetative or it is reproductive? Can you tell me? Seed. The seed, how is the seed formed? The seed is formed when the male and the female gamete unite. So that is a product of sexual reproduction. Is that clear, boys?
Yes, miss.
Okay. So vegetative propagation in potatoes is performed with the help of eyes present on the tuber. If you see the potato, whenever you have it in your house, you see there are some eyes which are present on it. Can you see these kind of buds that grow on potato, right? So this is how it, the eyes present on the tuber, it gives rise to a new plant. This is the leaf of the bryophyllum. On the leaf of the bryophyllum you find buds. If you put this into the soil, you bury it, new plants will come up, bryophyllum plants. So that's what they're saying. They're saying potato, eyes present on the tuber, okay, non-reproductive part of the plant. Bryophyllum, the buds present on the leaf margin. Sugarcane and grasses, propagation occurs with the help of buds present on the nodes, with the help of buds present on the nodes. So this is my vegetative propagation, where besides the flower, if reproduction takes place with from other plants, okay, parts of the plant, it is known as vegetative reproduction. Okay, now the last type of asexual reproduction in multicellular plants and animals that we see is spore formation. Formation of spores. Spores are different from seeds. A seed is reproductive part. Okay, when I talk about seed, it is the zygote. So it is the sexually reproductive part of the plant where a male and female gamete unite, and that's how you get a seed. Okay, but when I talk about spores, spore is asexual. Okay, there is no union of male and female gametes. So spore is asexual. We may confuse between a seed and a spore. A seed is known as a zygote. Whenever I talk about a zygote, I talk about male gamete plus female gamete. Only then can I get a zygote. Is this clear? Now, fungi
Miss, this
like
sporangia,
what
miss,
happened?
the sporangia burst and spread everywhere and new spore is formed.
Yes, and the spores. Yes, correct. Yes, right. New plants are formed. They germinate and a new fungal colony is formed. Right? Now see here, the fungi like spores, they have a filamentous body. They have sporangia. Okay. Once the spores are formed, the sporangia bursts open and these spores, they fall onto a suitable substrate and they germinate and a new fungal colony is formed. This is my spore formation. So if I go back to this slide and I talk about asexual reproduction in multicellular organisms, I can talk about first fragmentation. What can I talk about?
Fragmentation.
Fragmentation.
Okay. Then I can talk about regeneration. Regeneration. Okay. Then I can also talk about
Budding.
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 Okay. Then the fourth one is vegetative
Vegetative
propagation.
propagation.
Vegetative propagation.
Vegetative
Vegetative
propagation.
propagation.
Okay. And the last is spore
Spore.
formation.
Formation.
Last is spore formation. So these are my 5 methods of asexual reproduction in multicellular organisms. Right? Fragmentation, breaking into small pieces of fragments. This example that we studied for fragmentation was of Spirogyra. Regeneration, I talked about planaria, where the part of the plant, the animal gets broken and each part develops into a new this thing, right? A new plant, animal or plant. Budding is buds formed. Here we talked about Hydra. Vegetative propagation, the examples we talked about were potato, bryophyllum, and sweet potato. And spore formation, we spoke about the mucor, okay, on which it regenerates. Now that is my asexual reproduction. Now we come to first sexual reproduction in plants as well as in animals. But before we go to sexual reproduction, there are 2 important terms I'd like you to study. Okay, one is gamete formation. Just a minute, huh, boys. Please close the door. No, there's a lot of noise. Munni, darwaja band karo. Okay, gamete formation. Now, how are gametes formed? They are formed by the process of meiosis. Why meiosis has to occur, boys? Because the number of chromosomes, otherwise there will be 2n. For example, in humans, we have 46 chromosomes. So suppose my sperm cell also had 46 and my egg cell also had 46. If 46 and 46 would unite, I would have an organism which had 92 chromosomes. That would not be a human being at all, because in humans only 46 chromosomes are there. Therefore, for the formation of the male and the female gamete, what has to happen? This n has to become, this 2n has to become n. It has to split to half its number. So we have to have 23. So my male will have 23 and my female will have 23. So when the zygote is formed, it will have 46 chromosomes. So my original number is come back, right?
So it will birth a human.
Miss,
It will remain a human, correct.
Miss,
Okay, so gametes are
Miss, can you
formed by the process of meiosis. Gametes are formed by the process of meiosis. In meiosis, the chromosome number is reduced to half. Hence, the gametes formed are haploid, right? Now, very important, what is fertilization? I keep on repeating the statement. Haploid male gamete. Please remember, the male gamete is haploid. It has half the number of chromosomes. It unites with a haploid female gamete, also having half the number of chromosomes. When haploid plus haploid join together, you form a diploid zygote. Okay, and then this zygote divides by mitosis and a new individual is formed. So haploid male gamete plus haploid female gamete gives me my diploid zygote. Okay, this zygote then divides by mitosis and a new individual is formed. So fertilization is the union of a haploid male gamete with a haploid female gamete to form a diploid zygote. These words are very crucial. I hope you understood the meaning of it, right? Sexual reproduction in plants. Now we will talk about the flower, which is the structural unit of sexual reproduction. Now my flower is basically made up of 4 whorls. Okay, we will see this flower made up of 4 whorls. The 4 whorls of the flower are, this is my corolla. Okay, which is made up of petals. My flower basically consists of corolla, which is made up of petals. This outermost part, which is known as the calyx,
This calyx is made out of sepals, right?
Yes, calyx is made up of sepals. Corolla is made up of petals. That's what I've written. Okay, calyx is made up of sepals. So the outermost whorl is calyx. The second whorl is the corolla. Okay, and then you have the reproductive parts of the plant, which are the androecium and the gynoecium. The androecium and the gynoecium. The male part of the flower is known as the androecium, and the female part of the flower is known as the gynoecium. Now, please go back to this. Flower is a structural unit of sexual reproduction which consists of calyx, corolla. Calyx made up of sepals, corolla made up of petals. Androecium is made up of stamens. Now, each stamen consists of an anther. This is the filament and an anther. So, each stamen consists of the filament. I'll show you that in the plant. Okay, and it is made up of the filament and the anther. Now, in the anther, you get the pollen grains, which is the haploid male gamete. In the anther, you get the pollen grains, which is the haploid male gamete. Now, my gynoecium is made up of carpels, and each carpel is made up of an ovary, a style, and a stigma. Ovary, style, and stigma. In the ovary, there are ovules. Ovules are the haploid female gametes. The haploid female gametes are known as the ovules, right? So we have the ovules, which are the haploid female gametes, right? Then you have the style, and last you have the stigma. So you have ovary, style, and stigma, which is a part of the gynoecium, okay, which is known basically as the carpel. Can you see this, boys? This is the ovary, the style, and the stigma, right? In the ovary, we have ovules, right? And my stamen is made up of anther and filament. My stamen is made up of anther. Sorry, anther is on top here, and this is my filament. Okay, so these are the parts of a flower. These are the parts of the flower. Now, the male gamete is the, what is the male gamete? What is the male gamete known as?
This androecium.
Male gamete is not known as the androecium. The male reproductive part is known as the androecium. The male gamete is the pollen grain. What is the male gamete?
Pollen grain.
Pollen
What
grain.
is female gamete? What is female gamete, boys? What is the female gamete? The male gamete is the pollen grain. Female gamete is the egg cell or the ovule. It is known as the egg cell or the ovule, boys, right? So please understand, there are some flowers which are bisexual and some flowers which are unisexual. Now, bisexual flowers, all these are shoe flower and all, they are all bisexual, your hibiscus, because the male and the female whorl, that is the androecium and the gynoecium, are present in the same flower. If the flower is either male or female, as you've seen in the papaya, you have a male tree and a female tree, correct? Those are, they are known as unisexual. So either they are male or female. So in order for fruits to be produced next to the papaya plant, there has to be another female somewhere in the, so a male somewhere in the surroundings, so that the pollen grain is brought. If the pollen grain is not brought, male and female gamete cannot unite, right? The papaya tree cannot walk to the other papaya and say, okay, this is the pollen grain. No, it has to be taken by an agent, right, of pollination. Okay, in the same way, if the male and female part of the if the flower is bisexual, even then, in order to pollinate the flower, you require an agent. Okay, we'll talk about that. Now, before this, we go to pedicellate flower and we go to sessile flower. Those which have a stalk, okay, this is the stalk of the flower. This is known as pedicellate flower, and they do not have a stalk. Right, your rose has a stalk, so it is a pedicellate flower. Your hibiscus has a stalk, so it is a pedicellate flower, right? And which they do not have, they are known as sessile flowers. Now, boys, once again, this is a very, very clear diagram. Can you see this ovary, style, and the stigma? Okay, this stamen is made up of filament and anther. A very clear diagram, filament and anther. This is known as the thalamus, on which the ovary is, the whorls are placed on the thalamus. The whorls are calyx, corolla, androecium, and gynecium, right? So they are, some of them, that is the calyx and the corolla, are the non-essential parts of the flower, and the gynecium and the androecium are the essential whorls of the flower. Is that clear? They are known as the essential whorls of the flower. Now, when pollen grains are transferred from the anther to the stigma of the same flower or a different flower but of the same species, it is known as pollination. So the pollen grain has to reach the stigma. This can be done with the help of biotic agents like insects and animals, and abiotic agents like wind and water, which carry the pollen grains to the stigma, where they can germinate and produce a new flower, a new plant, right? Now, pollen grains germinate when they fall on the sticky stigma. So please look at this diagram very carefully. This is the stigma, this is the style, and this is the ovary, okay, which are the three parts of the carpel. So when the pollen grain reaches here, the pollen grain begins to germinate, okay, and when they germinate, they form a pollen tube. A tube is formed, okay, and the tube goes through the style. So this is the style. The pollen tube enters into the style, and when it enters into the style, the pollen grain that is there, it splits into two male gametes. So one pollen grain produces two male gametes. Both are haploid, not diploid. Both are haploid gametes, right? Now this pollen grain, they enter into that tube, and here at this tip, the tube breaks open. Now inside here, there are ovules, correct? Right? Now this male gamete, one of the male gametes unites with the egg. So this is a haploid male gamete which unites with the haploid egg, and it forms a diploid zygote. The second male gamete unites with two polar nuclei to form the endosperm, which gives nutrition to the growing seed, right? So the male gamete, one male gamete which is haploid, unites with the other, with one female gamete, in order to form a diploid zygote, which gives rise to the embryo, right? After the zygote, it forms the embryo. Embryo has the future of the plant, the root, stem, leaf. It has the future. That's how it can grow, right? And the other male gamete which unites with the polar nuclei gives rise to endosperm. This endosperm provides nourishment to the growing cell. This is more in detail. Can you see this pollen grain? The pollen grain has reached the stigma. The pollen grain begins to germinate. It forms a tube. Then the two cells are released. The two male gametes are released. They call it the sperm cells, right? And here the eggs are there. Now it penetrates here, it breaks open, and here the male gametes are united. Can you see this very, very carefully? This is the polar nuclei. This is the embryo sac, right? And there are egg cells and the polar nuclei. Now one male gamete fertilizes the egg to form the diploid zygote. Please read this statement. One of the sperm cells or one of the pollen male gametes fertilizes the egg to form the diploid zygote. The other sperm fertilizes the two polar nuclei to form the endosperm. Okay, it's called as a triploid endosperm, which will become the food source for the growing embryo. Okay, so this is a very, very important slide. Okay, system, the male reproductive system of humans consists of the testes. Okay, the testes, ducts and glands. So you remember three things. It consists of the testes, okay, ducts. A duct is a tube. Okay, whenever you have a tube, it is used to carry something. And you have glands. So testes, ducts and glands. These are the three things that the male reproductive system consists of. Right? Now, single TES, plural TES. Right? There is a pair of testes, means two testes. They are located outside the abdominal cavity of the male, outside the abdominal cavity of the male. This is because the temperature inside the body is slightly higher as compared to the temperature outside the body, right? So in that condition, it is kept so that the sperm does not suffer, right? The quality of the sperm does not suffer. That is why it is outside the body, outside the abdominal cavity. Now, this testes is made up of seminiferous tubules. Seminiferous tubules. Now, these seminiferous tubules, what they do is the germinal epithelium. Now, germinal epithelium is a type of tissue, right, which we have learned last year. Germinal epithelium, germ, the word germ means, the word germ does not mean kidas. The word germ means the male gamete, okay, or the female gamete. Now in this case, the germinal epithelium in the male produces the sperm, okay. It produces the sperm. By which process? It produces the sperm by the process of meiosis, because the sperm cannot have 2x chromosomes. It has to have X number of chromosomes. Is that clear? So the testes are produce the sperms. Okay, what produces the sperms? The germinal epithelium, which is present where it is present. It is present on the lining of the seminiferous tubules, which is a part of the testes, right? And this produces the sperm. The testes is located in a sac-like structure, which is known as the scrotum. Sac-like structure, which is known as the scrotum. Now, starting from the testes, there is like a small structure, right? This is not a gland; it is a storage space. It is known as the epididymis. Epididymis. What does the epididymis do? The epididymis stores the immature sperms and it allows the sperm to mature. When the sperm is mature, it is carried by this tube. Okay, this tube, which is known as the vas deferens. So the sperm that is produced in the testes is carried by the vas deferens, right? And on its way also it continues to mature. It is provided with fluids from 3 glands. This is the function of the 3 glands. The 3 glands are first seminal vesicle, second the prostrate gland, and the third, which is the seminal vesicle, the prostrate gland, and the Cowper's gland, which is not labeled out here, the Cowper's gland. So these are the 3 glands. Now the seminal vesicle, it secretes a seminal fluid. The prostrate gland secretes a prostatic fluid. Now, both this seminal vesicle and this prostrate gland, right, the fluid that they secrete constitutes the semen. So my semen consists of, okay, the sperm plus the secretions from the seminal vesicle and the secretions from the prostrate gland. So 1, 2 with the sperm, right? This forms the seminal fluid, which is then taken into the urethra, right? The vas deferens joins the urethra. Okay, that is not showing there. It joins the urethra. Urethra is the common opening for urine as well as for seminal fluid, right? However, both never come out together. When the sperm is being thrown out, the bladder shuts off the urine output, and finally the sperm that is there is ejaculated outside the body through an organ which is known as the penis, right? Now, so let's go through this. The male reproductive system consists of 3 things. I told you: testes, ducts, glands. Where are the testes located? Outside the abdominal cavity, in a scrotum, in a sac which is known as the scrotum. What do they contain? They contain seminiferous tubules, right? The germinal epithelium which is present in the tubules. This germinal gives rise to germ cells. Germ cells are the male gametes and the female gametes. They're a type of tissue which you studied last year in tissues, right? So they are present in the tubules. They divide by the process of meiosis and they produce sperms. Now, very, very important function of the testes is also to produce the hormone which is known as testosterone. Testosterone gives rise to secondary sexual characters. For example, deepening of the voice, okay, the beard that grows, the hair that grows on the body as well as the pubic region. All this is because of this hormone which is known as testosterone. Okay. Now, epidermis is also called a tube, right? But it is more like a sac-like structure. And what it does is it stores the sperms till they mature, and then they are transported from it, okay, from the testes to the vas deferens. Okay, it transports it from the testes to the vas deferens till they mature, right? The vas deferens transports the mature sperms through the urethra. Urethra is the opening of the urinary bladder, right? The tube that comes out of the urinary bladder, right? Now, the ejaculatory duct helps the transport of sperms, right? Ejaculatory duct. The prostate gland, it secretes prostatic fluid. Okay. The seminal vesicles, they secrete seminal fluid. They all go to the ejaculatory duct, right? They empty their secretions in the ejaculatory duct. And the Cowper's gland, it secretes a fluid that neutralizes any acidity that may be present in the urethra. So my semen consists of the sperm plus prostatic fluid plus secretion from the seminal vesicle plus secretion from the Cowper's glands, right? So these two are the secretions which help in the maturation of the sperm, and also it provides a fluid medium through which the sperm can be transported and thrown out of the body. Okay. Now, after this, we come to the female reproductive system. The female reproductive system is a little more complex as compared to the male reproductive system. And the female reproductive system is located inside the body of the female, right? Now, please understand, like you have testes in male, in the female, you have a pair of ovaries. You have a pair of ovaries. Right? What do these ovaries do? The ovaries, they produce, okay, the ova. The ova is the female gamete. Okay, singular is known as ovum. Right? It produces 1 ovum per month or maybe 2. Okay, by natural conditions, 1 or 2 ova are produced per month, right? So the ovary has number of ovules, right? But only 1 matures per month. Okay. Now the ova that matures, or the egg that matures, is taken by this tube-like structure which has this finger-like projections. It is known as the fallopian tube. Okay, it is also called as the oviduct to carry the ova. Therefore, it is known as an oviduct, right? And then the most important part, obviously, of the female reproductive system, ovary is also very important, okay, undoubtedly. But the cradle of life is the uterus, right? Now, the uterus, it has a lining which is known as the endometrium. The endometrium provides nourishment, right? If the baby is there in order to feed or in order to nourish the child and help in the growth of the fetus. Now, basically, the size of the uterus is the size of a pear. Okay, all of you know what is a pear, the green color pear that you eat. Can you imagine? And can you imagine entire life can grow in this pear-like structure, okay, in this pear-like structure. So this, okay, this uterus can expand. The elasticity is so much, right? When a baby is growing, it actually spreads and it pushes all the other organs away. It pushes the liver up, the stomach on the other side, but it makes space. Okay, we know of cases where ladies give birth to twins. We know of cases where ladies give birth to triplets. Okay, we've also seen cases where a lady can give birth to 6 to 8 children at a time, right? So imagine how that uterus expands, right, in order to accommodate the growing fetus, right? Now, after the uterus, you have a small opening which is known as the cervix. The cervix is known as the mouth of the uterus. The cervix is called as the mouth of the uterus. It only opens during childbirth. The cervix opens during childbirth to actually push out the baby during childbirth, right? Now, the other tube-like structure is known as the vagina. The vagina facilitates 3 things. First and foremost, the baby comes out through this opening, right? It is thrown out during natural childbirth. Secondly, normally every month, right, the uterus, it creates a lining which thickens, right, in order to welcome the baby inside. If the baby is not there, this lining, okay, is thrown out in the form of blood, and along with it the egg which did not get fertilized. So the blood also comes out through the vagina, and also it facilitates the entry of the male organ during the process of reproduction, so that the sperm cell can be thrown into this region. The sperm cell then moves up here. The sperm cell unites with the egg cell, and the fetus is produced. The fetus is produced. The ovary also, like the male cell, the testes produced the hormone which is known as testosterone, right? The ovary produces the hormones which are estrogen and progesterone. These are the 2 hormones which are secreted by the ovary, right? Now, the ovaries are oval-shaped organs which lie to the upper right and left of the uterus. They release eggs into the abdominal cavity, which are then picked up by the oviducts. Oviducts are also known as fallopian tubes. They also secrete the estrogen and progesterone, these hormones, right? It includes a pair of ovaries, 1 pair of ovaries, 1 pair of oviducts, and a single uterus, okay? Now, the oviducts, the free end of the oviduct is funnel shaped. It connects the uterus to the ovary, okay? Fertilization occurs in the oviduct. The uterus is a muscular organ which facilitates, which allows the growth of the fetus. The vagina is a tube that extends from the vaginal opening to the uterus, actually to the mouth of the uterus, which is known as the cervix. They have not told you too much on the cervix. So we stopped at this, okay? Now, what happens is the gametes which are formed. Which is the male gamete? Which is the male gamete? Boys, are you with me? Or have I got thrown out of the class? Which is the
Yes.
male gamete? Which is the male gamete? The male gamete is known as the... What is the male gamete? Sperm. And what is the female gamete known as?
Ovule.
Ovule.
It is not ovule, it is ovum, singular ovum, or it is egg. This is the female gamete.
Ova or egg, miss?
Yes, it is known as ovum, singular, ova, plural, or it is known as the egg. It is not called as the ovule, please. Right? Now, the male gamete is known as the sperm. Tell me, are they haploid or diploid, the sperm and the ovum? Are they haploid or diploid?
Diploid.
No, they cannot be diploid. They are
They are
haploid
haploid.
in nature. The sperm is haploid and the egg cell is also haploid, because if they have 46 chromosomes like in humans, okay, in human each cell has 46 chromosomes and the female also contributes 46. The child will have 92 chromosomes. It will not be some, it will be some other species. So always remember that the male and female gametes are always haploid. They are always haploid. Correct? And they are produced by the process of meiosis. Right? Now, a man can produce sperms from puberty till death. However, in the woman, the function stops of the reproductive system, maybe by the age, between the age of 45 and 50. This is known as menopause, pausing or stopping, okay, the reproductive cycle in the female. Okay, so the female becomes active like the male at puberty, okay, when she's approximately 13, 14 years of age, and then initially there is no egg production. Later on there is egg production in a couple of years. So by 14, 15, the reproductive age begins till menopause, right? Now, in the case of a female, every month, only from one ovary, either of the ovary, a single mature oocyte is released every month. Okay, this ceases at menopause, means it stops at menopause. Okay, now what happens is the sperms are many, but the egg is a single. Now you have the sperms which actually swim, right, to the egg. And the moment one sperm penetrates and it unites with the female gamete, it produces a protective layer around it. So no more sperms can enter, right? And fertilization takes place. Haploid male gamete, haploid female gamete to form a diploid zygote. This is known as fertilization. So the union of a haploid male gamete with a haploid female gamete to produce a diploid zygote is known as fertilization, Now, how does fertilization takes place? There, in humans, it is internal fertilization, means the fertilization occurs inside the body of the female. So it is known as internal fertilization. Okay. Now the semen is ejaculated by the male into the vagina of the female. From the vagina, the sperm travels upwards. If you see the female reproductive system, the sperm travels upwards, right? And it moves to this region, which is known as the oviduct. There, if it encounters an egg cell, it enters into the egg cell and it causes fertilization of the egg cell, and it results in the formation of the zygote. Now, the zygote cannot grow in the fallopian tube. If the zygote remains in the fallopian tube, it will not grow, it will die. This zygote then has to move down, and it has to embed itself in the uterus, and then it can begin to divide further, right? So first it has to move to the uterus for it to divide further. Is that clear? So this is fertilization, correct? Now, I said later, just wait. Now, fertilization takes place in the fallopian tube. It then travels and reaches the uterus. It gets implanted in the uterus, and it grows for the next 40 weeks, 36 to 40 weeks. That is for 9 months. The placenta is the organ which provides it with nourishment. The placenta is the organ which provides it with nourishment. So it grows and till it is finally grown, and it can be thrown out of the body. Okay. So what happens is, when this takes place, okay, around 9 months after fertilization, and it grows and it can be thrown and it can be expelled out of the body, and it comes and okay, and life begins, right? Now, please understand this next one. This is a very important slide to understand. Now, boys, if you remember last year, I told you that in the case of females, you have 44 autosomes and a pair of sex chromosomes. Sex chromosomes determines whether a species is male or female, right? Because we are unisexual, okay, individuals. You remember the lower animals, they were bisexual. Bisexual means in the same animal, you had the male as well as the female. In a flower, the flower is also generally bisexual. There are some flowers like the papaya and all which are unisexual. But generally, most of the flowers are bisexual. That is, the male and the female part is located in the same plant. Now, however, in the case of females, in normal females, you have 44 plus XX, and in a normal male, you have 44 plus XY. This is each and every cell of the human being. Now, what happens during gamete formation? I told you, meiosis takes place, right? Meiosis takes place. So, therefore, an egg cell can produce 22 plus X type of eggs. It cannot produce anything else. It has to produce 22 plus X only. And this is the female. And a male can produce 22 plus X or 22 plus Y. Okay, it can either produce okay, a gamete. The sperm can either have an X chromosome or it can have a Y chromosome. But the eggs always have the X chromosome because they are egg cells, right? And there is no Y in the human female. Okay, so they always produce eggs which have 22 plus X. Okay, now what happens is the sperm can be having X or it can be having Y. Now, when this X unites with the egg cell, you get XX and a female is born. Female is born. Okay, a girl child is born. If this X unites with this egg cell, again you can get a female. Okay, now if this Y cell unites with the X, or this Y unites with the X, you get XY. Okay, so this is the male. So there are 50% chances that a girl child is born and exactly 50% chances that a male child is born, right? It is all a matter of chance, right? But it depends on the sperm that is donated by the male partner. It does not depend on the female. The female has only X, right? So if the X sperm fertilizes, you get a male, you get a female. And if the Y sperm fertilizes the egg, you get a male. So the chances of male and female is entirely dependent on the sperm cell, right? And not on the egg cell. So for all you lovely boys whose parents think you are a gift to mankind, and if you had a sister and they ill-treat the sister, please remember, it is not your mother who's responsible, it's not the female who's responsible, but it is the male who donates or who gives either the X or the Y cell, right? So this is
Yes, miss.
Yes, ma'am.
the female reproductive system. It undergoes some changes at puberty. At puberty, puberty is attained between 11 to 14 years of age. And these changes, they repeat at a regular interval of time. That is every 28 to 30 days. These repetitive changes, the changes that occur over a repeated or a regular interval of time, is called as the menstrual cycle. Now we must remember that it is controlled by mainly 4 hormones. There are 4 hormones that control this cycle. They are the FSH. Okay, we will go through all these names as we go by. FSH is follicle stimulating hormone. FSH, follicle stimulating hormone. LH is the luteinizing hormone. And these 2 hormones, estrogen and progesterone, which are secreted by the ovary, right? So there are 4 hormones, FSH, LH, estrogen and progesterone. The follicle stimulating hormone and the luteinizing hormone are not secreted by the ovary. Okay, the ovary does not secrete this hormone. It is secreted by the pituitary gland. If you remember last year, I told you this is the master endocrine gland, the pituitary gland. It secretes this hormone which is known as FSH. The luteinizing hormone is also secreted by the pituitary gland. So estrogen and progesterone are the hormones that are secreted by the ovaries. On the other hand, follicle stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone are secreted by the master endocrine gland, which is known as the pituitary gland, which is located at the base of the head. Okay, the base of the neck region, the pituitary gland is located. Right? Now, what is the function of these hormones? Let us start with the first hormone, which is the follicle stimulating hormone. Now, you remember that day we talked about the ovary, right? The ovary is located on either side of in the abdominal cavity. If we look at the diagram once again, okay, this is a gland which is located on either side of the abdominal cavity. In the uterine cavity, more specifically, you will have the ovary which is located, right? Now, what does this ovary do? There are many ovules inside. There are many egg cells inside. Okay, right at the time of the child's birth, right? These egg cells are there, correct? But these egg cells are not mature. They are not mature. So what happens is, every 28 days, this hormone, that is the follicle stimulating hormone, it causes one of the follicles in the ovary to develop. Okay, so out of the many follicles, one follicle will begin to develop. It can be from the left ovary or from the right ovary. From one of the ovaries, generally only one follicle begins to mature. Now, in some cases, two may mature, but if more than that, if more follicles than that mature, then there is a defect which is there. So generally, naturally, only one or more than or maximum two follicles will develop. Now, the follicle stimulating hormone stimulates this follicle to develop. And along with the follicle, the oocyte which is present in it also begins to develop. Now, once this develops, it secretes the hormone which is known as estrogen. It secretes the hormone which is known as estrogen. So, what is the next hormone? That is the luteinizing hormone. Now, the follicle which has developed, okay, it ruptures, it breaks, okay, and what happens to it? The egg that is there is released. Where is it released? In that entire abdominal cavity. Okay. Now this egg that is released is a mature egg, which is picked up by the oviducts. Okay. The ducts or the fallopian tubes pick up this egg cell that is there. Now this egg cell then starts to travel up the fallopian tube or the oocyte, right? So the luteinizing hormone, it causes the follicle which has developed to rupture, and it releases the oocyte which is known as ovulation. Okay. Now, what happens is you have your, I explained to you just now, you have your follicle which has developed, right? So now this follicle which has developed, it has ruptured, the egg has been released. Okay. So this leftover follicle that is there, the remaining tissue of the follicle, okay, this begins to form corpus luteum. This begins to form corpus luteum, which now secretes the fourth hormone, which is known as progesterone. So if FSH and LH are not there, the progesterone and estrogen will not be secreted only, right? Now, this corpus luteum begins to secrete progesterone, and what does it do to the uterus? It prepares the uterus for the implantation of the fetus, right? It prepares the uterus for the implantation of the fetus, okay? The estrogen causes the endometrium to start developing. So the endometrium of the uterus begins to develop. So both these hormones, progesterone and estrogen, they participate in building up the wall of the uterus, so that if a pregnancy occurs, the uterus is ready for the developing fetus, Now, as we learned, fertilization takes place in the fallopian tube, but the fetus which has developed moves down, right? It is, if you remember the diagram, right? It's a pear-shaped structure, and these are the fallopian tubes. Now, the fertilization takes place here, but it moves down here to the uterus, and the uterus has to be prepared in order to accept this growing fetus, the growing embryo. Okay, this is done by these two hormones, that is the progesterone and the estrogen. Now, every time fertilization does not take place, okay, in their lifespan, generally women have 1, 2, maximum 3 children, right? Now, the remaining egg cells that were there, but every month the uterus prepares itself to receive the fetus. It does a preparation. It prepares. So in case the fetus is there, it does not get expelled from the body, right? So if this oocyte is not fertilized within 24 hours, okay, now the corpus luteum was formed, it becomes inactive and gets converted into corpus albicans, right? The moment the corpus luteum gets converted into corpus albicans, the level of progesterone and estrogen immediately fall, and this causes the endometrium to degenerate. right? Now, the tissues of the degenerating endometrium and the unfertilized egg are thrown out through the vagina. And the endometrium lining is obviously made up of blood, right? And this is thrown out, okay, because the uterus has to prepare once again for the next time. Now, this bleeding of 5 days is known as menstruation. That bleeding for 5 days is known as the menstruation, and the entire thing is known as the menstrual cycle. Now just pay attention. Okay, now look at this diagram. Very nicely it is given, right? Now you look at this. This is day 1. This is day 1 of the cycle, right? Till day 5 of the cycle, what happens is there is bleeding. This is known as the menstruation phase for the first 5 days, right? Now you see the hormones, all are less. FSH, LH, okay, the green hormone is LH, the FSH is the red one is FSH, the red one is FSH, the green one is LH, the blue one is estradiol, which is estrogen, and the black one, can you see the black line? The black line is progesterone. Look very carefully, black, okay, this is the progesterone, right? The green line is the luteinizing hormone, okay? The blue line is the estrogen or estradiol, it's the same thing. And the red line is the follicle stimulating hormone. Okay, let's put different colors so that you will understand still better, right? Let's put different colors. Let's erase all the ink from the slide and let's put different colors for this, right? Now, the color of progesterone is, right, black. Am I right? The color of progesterone is black according to this diagram, okay, not normally, right? The color of luteinizing hormone is green. The color of luteinizing hormone is green. The color of estrogen is blue. And the color of follicle stimulating hormone is red, right? Now watch those 4 graphs very carefully. See, by the 5th day, can you see the level of this FSH goes up as well as the level of FSH goes up. So when the level of FSH goes up from the 5th day, what happens initially is the follicle begins to mature in the ovary. One of the follicles begin to mature. Okay, this occurs till the 14th day. Till 14th day, between the 13th and the 15th day, the follicle matures, right? Once it matures, the luteinizing hormone, it causes it. See, can you see this is the follicle? It has begun to develop. Then the follicle has begun to mature. On the 14th day, it ruptures and it forms what is known as corpus luteum. Once this corpus luteum is formed, the other 2 hormones also increase. The blue hormone, can you see the blue hormone has increased, and the black hormone also has increased. Progesterone, blue increases first, progesterone increases later, right? Now what happens is the egg waits to be fertilized. If the egg is fertilized, then different changes occur. But if the egg is not fertilized, what happens is the corpus luteum degenerates and it becomes corpus albicans. Once it becomes copper albicans, okay, what happens to it is these levels start falling. Can you see the levels of progesterone and estrogen? They have begun to fall. Once they begin to fall, it will then cause the cycle to start back again, right? Now, what if fertilization occurs? If the oocyte is fertilized and the embryo is implanted, okay, then this temporarily ceases, it stops till childbirth. Till childbirth, there is no cycle that occurs, okay? And for an initial phase of 5 to 6 months also, the cycle does not occur because all the hormones are now resting, right? And later on, when they become active, the cycle continues once again. The cycle continues once again. They have mentioned one is in vitro fertilization. They have talked about in vitro fertilization. Okay. They have also talked about surrogacy. These are two methods used, especially when the problem is in the female partner. These two processes are used. One is IVF, that is in vitro fertilization, and the other is surrogacy, right? Now, as I explained to you even before, in the technique of in vitro fertilization, the fertilization is brought about in the test tube. Okay, what they do is, as I told you, every month one egg is produced by the ovary, right? But for this process, in order to take out only one egg, and we don't know the quality of that egg, right? So therefore, what they do is they hyper stimulate the ovary. They give some kind of medication so that the ovary, instead of one egg, it produces 5 to 6 eggs, right? In that particular month, in that month only, right? Then what is done is, by the process of laparoscopy. Now, laparoscopy is a technique in which a tube is inserted into through the vagina up to the ovary, and they pick out the ovules, right? These 5, 6 ovules, right? Now, what they do is they take these ovules in a test tube, and they also collect the sperm from the male partner, right? Now, what they do with it is they take this sperm and this egg and they unite it in the test tube. The zygote is formed. From the zygote, it converts into a 2-cell stage, 4-cell stage, 8-cell stage, 16-cell stage, and then they reintroduce this back into the uterus of the mother, again through a surgical process, right? Through a laparoscopic process, right? And the fetus continues to develop in the ovary of the mother, in the uterus of the mother, not in the ovary of the mother, in the uterus of the mother.
Yes,
Is that clear? Okay. Now, please look at this diagram. The first step is ovarian stimulation hormone therapy. They stimulate the ovary with the help of hormones in order to release eggs, right? Now, the eggs are picked up and they are introduced. Sorry, the eggs are picked up from the ovary. See, this is the ovary. They pick up the eggs by a surgical process. Okay, the sperm is prepared, right? They take the entire semen and they remove the sperms which they find suitable, right? Then this egg is fertilized with the sperms. That is the fourth step. See, the embryo development takes place, right? Once the embryo development takes place, again they insert it, they transfer the embryo. It's called as embryo transfer. They take it and they introduce it again into the uterus of the mother, where the baby begins to grow once again, right? Now, what is surrogacy? Sometimes it is not the ovary that is a problem. It is the uterus that is the problem, and it cannot hold the fetus. The uterus is not strong enough to hold the fetus. In that case, okay, these women can take the help of a technique called as surrogacy. Now, what is done? The same IVF procedure is repeated. Okay, the oocyte is collected from the ovary of the woman. Now, this is from the mother whose child they want to bear, who wants to have a child, right? Now, this oocyte is fertilized with the sperms collected from her husband only. The embryo formed is implanted in the uterus of another woman who has a normal uterus. Okay, now the parent, the mother and father are the biological parents. and the lady who bears the child for them is known as a surrogate mother. She is known as a surrogate mother. The child grows in her womb and the child is produced and it is returned to the parents so that they can now have their own biological child, which is only delivered by another mother, which is known as a surrogate mother. Is that clear? Now, the next thing. Okay, what is the sperm bank or the semen bank? Now, sometimes the problem can be with the male also. They can have a low sperm count, or in some cases, the semen does not have sperms at all. They are known as azoospermic males, right? This because of some defect, the testis does not produce the sperm. Okay, so the sperm is collected from another person, okay, who is generally not known to the couple, right? So that person generally undergoes a lot of physical and medical checkups, and therefore this this sperm is stored in a sperm bank, and it is donated to the partner, right? Now, these are all techniques of reproductive techniques. There are many more. Okay, it is very, very complicated also and done very nicely. But see, boys, finally, life is given by the creator. Okay, these are all techniques which doctors use in order to help childless couples. There are many people who really long to have children, so they try these various techniques. Life is always given by a creator, okay, because finally the child has to develop in the womb of the mother. There is no technique by which a child can fully grow in a test tube, right? Now we come to another concept which is known as twins. Now, what are these? What happens? There are two types of twins, okay? Monozygotic twins and dizygotic twins. Please understand this very carefully. It is very nice and very easy to understand, right? Now, every month, I told you, generally one egg is produced by the female. One egg is produced by the female, correct? Now, there are many sperms, correct? Now, what happens sometimes is there is an egg, okay? It is fertilized by a sperm and a zygote is formed. The zygote is formed, correct? Sometimes this zygote divides into two, and from one zygote you get two babies. This is known as monozygotic twins. This is known as monozygotic twins, right? What has happened is, before or within 8 days of zygote formation, the cells of that embryo divided into two, and therefore these two babies will now develop in the womb of the mother, correct? Such twins are genetically similar to each other, okay? And they look also pretty much the same. They are definitely of the same gender. That is either male, male or female, female. They cannot be male and female. These are monozygotic twins, right? Which are formed from one zygote dividing into two, correct? Now, sometimes there are Siamese twins. These are known as conjoined twins. Now, what happens sometimes while this zygote divides, right? Certain parts of it remain joined together. So these are two babies, okay, which develop in the uterus of the mother. They are joined together. Some part of their body is common, and these are known as Siamese twins, or they are known as conjoined twins. So some monozygotic twins, okay, it's 1 in a million cases. right? But they may be conjoined, and therefore they are known as Siamese or conjoined twins. Now, normally every month only one egg is released by the ovary, but sometimes by chance more than one egg may be released, right? And if the sperm unites with this egg at the same time, sometimes there may be two babies developing in the womb, but those two have been fertilized by two different sperms and two different eggs have been fertilized, right? It is only that it has happened at the same time. These types of twins are known as dizygotic twins. They may be of the different sexes. You may have a male and female combination. There may be two males also who are dizygotic, right? So I said occasionally two oocytes are released from the ovary of a woman, and both oocytes are fertilized by two separate sperms, and thus two zygotes are formed. Two embryos are formed from those two zygotes, and both of those are separately implanted in the uterus, and thus dizygotic twins are delivered after complete development. They are genetically different from each other and may be of the same or of different by gender. They may be boy also, which are dizygotic, and the others which are monozygotic.